And we're good.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I am Bart Robley, and you are here on the Drummers Education Connection. I'm here with what I consider right now 4 of the greatest human beings ever born. Okay, first of all, up in the Bay Area, Jeremy Steinkohler, Chip Ritter, the amazing Chip Ritter, Rick Stojak down in San Diego, and today's guest in Nashville, Tennessee, the great Dave Northrup. Dave, how are you, buddy?
Hi, Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Hey, listen, I want to give a quick synopsis. Now, normally the show's about an hour-ish. We're going to take about 58 minutes of that reading Dave's bio here and everybody's played with. So bear with me here. Dave's played with Tanya Tucker, Pam Tillis, Lee Greenwood, Deborah Allen, Joe Diffie, Ty Herndon, John Cougar Mellencamp. This one, come on, the Disco Biscuits. That's amazing. Just the name itself. One of my favorites, Travis Tritt, Wynonna Judd, Connie Smith, the Oak Ridge Boys, Boz Scaggs, Rick Derringer, and the list goes on and on. He endorses Chip, you're going to love this one, Peisty Cymbals, Gretsch Drums, Evans Drumheads, Vader Drumsticks, Drum Workshop Pedals, and Pearl Hardware. And the guy's groove is so deep that they named an aerospace company after him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they spelled it wrong. But
that's right, correct. You're right.
Exactly. Dave, how are you, man? Welcome. It's an honor to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks for being here. Pleasure.
Yeah.
Hey, so I'll start off with this. You know, having watched you played over the years and been a fan of your work and stuff like that. One of the things I noticed right away when I was looking over your bio and everything like that, you've played with some of the biggest names in the business. I mean, Boz Scaggs and everything like that. And you do have your name as, an independent drummer. Living in Nashville's a completely different animal than living in LA or someplace like that. How did you break in Nashville when, before we got on, we'll talk a little bit about this during the show today, but before we got on, we talked about, what a great opportunity people have down in Nashville now because there's so much live music, but also the competition. How did you break into that? And how did you decide, hey, I'm not just going to be tied to one artist. I'm going to play with as many people as I can. How did that work for you?
That's an interesting question. Initially when I moved here in '95, I had my heights set on ideally what I envisioned for myself was I wanted to come to town and be a studio guy, and a lot of guys come to town with that same sort of goal. And you come here and you realize how difficult that is to achieve just because it's such a small clique, close-knit amount of guys that do generally all the session work.
Right.
And to be able to break into that's very difficult. But that was my aim. And I had played I lived in Central Florida when I moved here, and I had played with a guy named Les Dudek, and I had played on an album that Jeff Beccaro had played on. So I had a credential, and I thought, this is going to open doors for me. Well, I had a rude awakening. I was very humbled. I did get session work, but I realized how green I was. But I really stuck it out and focused on that for 5 years with the intention of just being an in-town guy. And back then, when I moved to town in '95, there were guys that stayed in town and recorded, and then there were guys that went on the road. And those two worlds never mixed. Either you were a road guy or a studio guy. Now that's changed considerably. But back then, you sort of had to pick and choose your designation. So after about 5 years of beating the streets in Nashville, and as the industry started to diminish a little bit with the onset of downloads and the lack of album sales, the town started to shrink. So having been here for 5 years, I decided, I'm gonna look for a road gig. And after 5 years of being in town, I had some relationships and connections with people that had gigs, and I just put the word out that I was looking, And in 2000, I had the privilege of auditioning for a guy named Clay Davidson, who was a new country artist. I didn't get that. And then at the audition for Clay Davidson, I met a guy who was the band leader for Pam Tillis. He asked me to come audition for Pam Tillis. I didn't get that. Lost that gig to Rich Redmond. And then by way of another person I knew, I got an opportunity to audition for Trisha Yearwood. Didn't get that gig. And then one thing led to another. I auditioned for Travis Tritt 2000 and got that gig. And that was a really good, it was definitely a God thing. And I'll tell you why. I got that gig with Travis and I kept that gig for 9 years. The gig with Pam Tillis only lasted 3 years, and then she cleaned house and got a whole new band. Trisha Yearwood's band played one tour in 2000, and then she let everybody go and took 3 years off. The gig I got with Travis Tritt lasted me 9 years consecutively. And it was a great ride. And man, I met so many people. And also just having that credential kind of like justified me in Nashville. Playing with Travis Tritt opened up so many other doors that allowed me to sub when I wasn't on tour with him, to go out and play shows with Tanya Tucker, and who I also auditioned for. Actually, I think in '99 I didn't get the gig, and then 3 years later I get called, not even to audition, just to go out and sub and play with
Nice.
her, you know. So I guess that is the long answer to how things established for me in Nashville. It took, you know, I was told when I moved to town, it was a 5-year town. And I will say that it was almost 5 years to the day that I got the Travis Tritt gig.
Really? No kidding.
And that opened some doors.
Yes. I really appreciate you, David, sharing your experiences of not getting the gig. You know, so many of the people we talk to are
there's a long list of those.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
You know, that makes it real, because you know, we always hear the stories about the people that got the gig, and this is how my career rose to stardom, is I got this gig, then that gig, and that gig. And, you know, the path to success is littered with failures, you know. And
that's a great question. I was thinking of asking you, how did you deal with that rejection? How did you get back into the saddle when you didn't get the gigs?
Well, that's also a great question. I had this incredible privilege in '97. So I had been here for 2 years, and I played with the great Anthony Jackson. I had an opportunity to play with him, and I was incredibly green. I was part of an original R&B band that he was part of, and I was just the fill-in drummer for this project. They wanted Dennis Chambers. They couldn't get Dennis Chambers until they got a record label and signed and all that stuff. So I was just sort of the guy to play with this band until something happened with them. So, and I was fine with that. But in my experiences with Anthony, I recorded myself. Anytime I went to an audition, a rehearsal, I recorded all the rehearsals with him. And I remember on the last gig I played with him, he said to me, I said, "Hey, you know, I can't really express the appreciation I have for your honesty and your willingness to work with me." Okay. You know, after playing with the guys he played with. And I said, "Do you have any advice?" And this was really quick in passing. He was getting ready to leave and get on a plane. He goes, "Keep recording yourself. You'll figure it out." And that was the last thing he left with me. So I took some sort of recording device and I recorded all my auditions so I could review them. And what I found out was, at some of the auditions, it was a playing thing. I remember listening back to a few audition tapes, and there were a few instances where I might have dragged a little bit, or I might not have really locked in with the bass player, which is not only my responsibility, it was his responsibility. Sometimes people don't click, you know? Right. And so I used every opportunity as a learning experience. You know, I didn't want to be defeated. And in the short period of time I had lived in Nashville, I had been around musicians that had been here longer than I, that just had this bitter, negative spirit to them because they'd been beaten up. and they had the audition and they didn't get the gig. And I think your personality translates how you play and how you mess with people. I mean, we are just, especially musicians, we are definitely an extension of our personalities on the drum set. What I meant was as drummers. We really, I think a lot of times it's very evident people play their personality. Someone like Simon Phillips, very sophisticated. Someone like Dave Weckl, very involved and integrated. Steve Gadd, listen to Steve Gadd talk, and then you listen to his groove. I mean, there's so much space. He doesn't say a whole heck of a lot because he doesn't need to. So anyways, one of the things that was profound for me was recording myself. And I will have to share this one story. I was in the running for the Trisha Yearwood gig. There was about 15, 16 guys that auditioned over a 2-day period. And the end of, I was the last guy to audition on the first day. And it went really, really well. I got great feedback from the band leader. Trisha Yearwood loved how I played. She, said, you made it sound like we've been playing together for years. And so I left on a really high note, went home that evening. The band leader called me and said, dude, you really kicked butt. It would be very difficult for somebody to come in here and take the gig from you. So I just want to let you know. So I'm like, okay, great. So next day of auditions take place, and I knew the last one was going to be about 2:00 in the afternoon. And the band leader said, I'll give you a call after that. Well, it was 4:00 and I hadn't heard from him. So I kind of knew something's up. Got the phone call. He said, man, you did great. But Trisha went with Charlie Morgan, Elton John's drummer. So I just want to let you know you did great. And I remember I was in my house and I sat down in my chair and I prayed. I said, God, look, I know there's a better place you have for me. There's some place you want me to be. The only thing I ask you is to carry me through this season and not let me get bitter, not let me lose hope.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And you know what, guys, like I said, it was 2 months later, I auditioned for Travis, and that was the gig I was supposed to have. So the long of the short of it for me was really to try to learn from those opportunities and not become discouraged. I was young too. I was 30. I was 31, 32 years old. Man, I look at these young guys that can play their cans off, and I thought I was pretty good. I was a pretty good player, but hindsight being what it is, compared to today, I would love to sit down with that 32-year-old guy and say, dude, man, you need to calm down and chill. You have so much more. And I think I had a good perspective about things, being that I just wanted to stay positive, because that's everything. And gosh, in our industry, there's an enormous amount of failures that we come in contact with, not even auditions, but gigs per night. Some nights you're on, some nights you're off. There's nights I come home from a gig and it's like, why do I even do this? It just wasn't happening. And and you'll talk to the people you're playing with and they're like, no, you were great. I'm like, yeah, but dude, I just was not feeling it. I apologize. Let me give the money back.
Man. Hey Dave, could you take us a little deeper into the audition process? Is everybody sharing the same kit? Are you playing with clicks?
That's great.
Are there charts? Do you learn the whole catalog? Do you have some stories and some thoughts for some of our listeners about if they have to do an audition? Obviously, what you said, recording your previous audition, that's so important.
Yeah, and when I recorded them, I used a little handheld tape recorder, because we're talking back in 2000, before all the Zoom cameras and what you can do with your iPhone. Now the technology is just incredible. But generally speaking, how the auditions have taken place with in my experience is, once you get an in with a management company or a band leader, they will send you specific material that they expect for you to prepare. Now, sometimes it could be as many as 12 songs. maybe 6 songs, but whatever the case may be, the material is generally shared beforehand. So the way I would approach is before I sat behind the drum set at all, I would sit down and I would chart everything out verbatim as well as I could, as far as transcribing the drum part. I get the tempos, and then, I would consult with the band leader if I had the opportunity to confirm tempos versus the recording, the original recording tempo versus the live, because I want to have as much information ahead of time, so I'm not kicking the song off 2 beats below what they're normally used to. So, I was always very forthcoming about getting as much information as possible. You prepare the material, and then what you said was interesting too, because most of the time everyone will audition on the same kit just for expedience. You can get people in and out faster.
Right.
Which was the case for all the auditions I've had except for Trisha Yearwood. They wanted me to bring my own gear because they wanted to hear my sound. They wanted to hear the drums I was going to be using.
Hey, that's cool.
Yeah,
no kidding.
I thought was very impressive. And
that is cool.
Because that's a big part. And I'll tell you, it's true that's significant. I found that and learned and became very humble when I played with Boz, because everything tonality wise to him was the 1976 Silk Degrees record. I had to make my drums sound like Jeff Porcaro's kit in 1976. Wow. And let me tell you, that was a challenge because I love wide open drums. I want them to ring. And I had to tape all this stuff to my snare drum. And the humbling thing was, it took me a while to figure out the head combination for what I needed to set my drums up, how I needed to set my drums up, so I could accomplish what he was hearing without having to manipulate the drum so much. Because there's so many drum head options now. So it took me a while to figure that out. But that was a perfect example of how he was very concerned about the sound of my drums. It not necessarily was my sound, but it was the sound that was required to serve his song, to serve his music.
Right.
And as a sideman, you have to put your artistry aside. As a sideman, we serve. So if that means you have to abandon your specific sound to serve a specific music, that's what you do.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I got a question for you, Dave. When you were talking about the session work, I'm always ears on that stuff. And you said that when you got to town and you started playing, you had some chops, you could play at the click and you had good time, but you were really humbled. What were some of the things that you ran into with like engineers or producers where you're like, oh yeah, I get it now, I got to go work on that? What were some of those things?
Well, straight up from a player's perspective, my reading was definitely not on. The other thing too is Nashville has a whole different reading process called the Nashville number system, which is not really difficult to understand, but from a beginner standpoint, it was like it was like nothing I had ever experienced before. So there was a learning curve there. Sonically, the drums that I had when I first moved to town were great, but they really weren't what I needed for what I wanted to accomplish in the studio. The other thing that I was humbled about was tuning. I know that back then I had the attitude that tuning was sort of important, but the engineer will make sure that they'll make it all sound good. Well, engineers don't want to be your friend if you don't bring in nice sounding stuff. It makes their job more difficult.
Right.
So you have to be responsible for your own sound. So there was that I had to contest with, and it was a challenge. For sure.
Hey, Dave, are you auditioning with clicks as well too?
That's a good question, because I was going to circle around back to that. Yes. I'll tell you why. I did, I think, for all the auditions. I did for all the auditions. But when I was talking about that one audition where I listened back to my recording and I started to drag,
Mhm.
I remembered that audition specifically. It was Pam Tillis. And after that audition, I went on to play with her, okay, years later. But one of the things that I was trying to compensate for when I was playing to the click is she loves to sing behind the beat, to the point where she really wants to drag stuff back. So inherently, when I was listening to her, I thought, all right, well, I'm going to try to get behind her. Well, it was one of those things. She kept singing behind the beat. I kept getting behind her. And eventually I turned the click off. So it went one of those things where it really took a nosedive.
I see.
Okay.
So-
Yeah.
So I learned at that audition, I got to stand my ground. If they say it's 105, I'm going to stay at 105. If I try to compensate, then I'm not doing my job. And I'll tell you, years later, when I played with her on a regular basis, she would still do the same thing. So
No kidding.
it was one of those gigs I had to commit to the click, and I had to be vocal to the other guys in the band, saying, "Listen, if you don't follow me, you follow her. We're going to have this really tug of war, okay? Because you're going to want to follow her, and I have to stay constant, and it's not going to feel the way it should. I know she's the boss, but she's paying us to serve her and keeping good time. Now, she's got a problem with the tempo. She'll let me know, hey, bring it back a click.
Yeah.
Or bring it back 2 clicks, and I'll do it. But we have to be. You have to be a command center. You have to know your job and stick to it. But that's just one instance. But all the other instances, I did play an audition with a click. When I got the Travis Tritt gig, that was a totally live gig. And for the first 3 years, I just used a rhythm watch to get tempos, and then we were gone, and we just played.
Okay.
And that was cool because everybody had good time and we ebbed and flowed. And then I decided that I started to want to incorporate the click track a little bit more for me, for a discipline, and for for learning to be able to play live with a click and to be able to control ebb and flow and sort of I don't know, use it as a tool, a learning tool. Not all the songs, but there were a few songs that I would play to the click the whole way through. And then there were instances where if we started going into the solo and it started to breathe, I'd just turn it off. It was
okay.
it was music.
Right.
It wasn't math. It wasn't. I didn't want music has to breathe. And that was one of those gigs where it was very organic, and tempos were the same night to night, but sometimes if within reason, if things were going to increase by 1 or 2 BPM because the solo was growing, that's human.
Yeah. Right.
So
Yeah.
so that was that gig. With the Boz Scaggs gig, everything was on the click. Everything was clicked. But I guess I kind of went off on a tangent. Yes, to answer your question, all the auditions that I can remember, I played to a click. I'm sure there were instances where I didn't, but generally speaking, today in popular music and in any setting that you walk into in the Nashville scene, you're required either to play to a click or play to programmed parts.
Like loops,
loops, and vocal enhancement arrangements. That's the norm.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Dave. I watched some of the videos of you playing just yesterday with Boz Scaggs, and I was just absolutely struck with the depth of your pocket, the consistency of your feel. Man, it was like hit me right in the gut. I'm going to use those videos to demonstrate good feel to my students now because they were so good. Is there any mental? You're welcome. Yeah, it was so great to witness.
Do I send you a check, Jeremy, for saying all that? I can PayPal you.
No, honestly though, man, it was really, really cool.
Thank you.
Is there any mental preparation you do for yourself before you go on stage to help you get into the right mindset to be relaxed and leave the baggage behind or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah, I got to be honest. That was the most intense gig I've ever had. He was very, very difficult to work with. Not because he was abusive, but because he really had high expectations for everybody that played with him.
I can
And
imagine. I can
so
imagine.
I honestly, guys, I got to tell you, whether you're a religious person or not, I prayed every night that I was going to bring it and serve, because if you didn't, you'd hear about it. And I feel very proud that I was able to get through that whole gig, the whole tour, because I heard stories about great players that had come into that camp and didn't make it. They would get let go. And honestly, with the players that had, after Jeff Porcaro and Carlos Vega, come on, everybody slumped after that.
Yeah.
I mean, really, what are you gonna? Who's gonna come in here and make you happy?
Right.
So being, there are guys like Sonny Emery had played there.
Wow.
Greg Bissonette toured with him. Peter Erskine toured with Boz.
Wow.
I mean, there was a list of guys that were staggering, that almost intimidating. And to be on that list of guys is very humbling and makes me very proud. Excuse me, sorry about that. But that was one of the things. I mean, seriously, I prayed, and I also was, I really had to mentally condition myself to be focused, because it was a gig of really significantly staying focused. Volume was a consideration. It was a very a volume sensitive gig, and the environments changed so frequently from an amphitheater to a small indoor theater, where you had to be very sensitive. Boz's hearing, he had a great deal of hearing loss, so you had to be very sensitive to that, because his microphones were so loud. So anything really obtrusive, anything that was going to spike, was going to get into his vocal mic. So
yeah, I noticed you had a what do you call it?
A little plexiglass. I had like a three pieces of shield.
Yeah,
and I was stage left at an angle, so there was just three pieces of shield that sort of kept me from the direct cymbal assault, if you will, with his microphone. And there was a point in the middle of the tour that he had mentioned, Boz mentioned, because everything's going real well. I'd like to maybe work on getting that shield down. And I started sweating, and I went to the tour manager and I said, "Look, that shield is keeping me hired. I don't want to get rid of it." And he goes, "Oh, don't worry about it. The shield's not going anywhere." I'm like, "Oh, thank you, Lord," because it was a challenge even with the shield. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, now it'll keep you from getting COVID.
Yeah,
exactly. Everybody wants a shield now.
Yeah, we all need bubbles. We got to live in a bubble. Yeah.
Hey, David, I was wondering, I want not to change the subject, but I've kind of written down my questions, and one of the ones I have is you're noted as a clinician as well, and a drum teacher, and I wanted to know, when and how did you end up teaching and getting into teaching, and how did that transpire?
Oh, it was something that I always wanted to do, and I think my approach to teaching is so unconventional, meaning that I learned best in a very unconventional way. And as you guys know, as teachers, you have an array of students, and part of the job as being an inspirational coach is finding out how to reach certain students, because some guys are methodical and meticulous, and they're going to be able to grasp what is in a book. Other guys are not. I learned by listening and hearing and seeing, sort of the Montessori approach. So if you showed me something or played me something, I could play it back. So I think that was the way I learned best. But as a result of that, my reading was lacking, and I had to go back and spend time on that, because that's incredibly fundamental and very important. So I got into teaching because I wanted to be able to, help inspire other young or mature players the way I had been inspired. It's sort of like passing things along, and I always knew I wanted to do clinics. I always wanted to be able to have the opportunity to inspire people to reach beyond themselves and realize that I was just an ordinary average drummer that decided to follow his dream, and I was blessed because I did it. And there, you can do it too. You know, it's not one of this most cosmic thing that only happens to special people, man. You know, if you are a dedicated human being and it's something that you're called to do and you put the work in, you can do it. I did.
Love that.
You got to
Love
put the work in.
that.
And you know what a great thing? I always used athletics and music in the same context because
I do too. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I did too.
there are no cheat codes for music.
Right.
There are no cheat codes in athletics. If you're really good and you sit on your butt and not do anything and you're not motivated, the guy with the average skill that busts his butt and works his tail off is going to outplay you every time.
Absolutely.
He'll outrun you. He'll out sprint you. He'll outlift you in the gym because your natural abilities are only going to get you so far. Great drummers are made, not born. Buddy Rich, Vinnie Caliuta, Dave Weckl, they all did the work. They had this great, incredible gift that was God given, but they busted their cans. That's how they became great. You know, there are no shortcuts. You just got to do the work. You know?
Thank you. I love that.
There it is.
Yeah,
I love that, man.
That's the truth.
That's a tagline right there.
Speaking of doing the work, I got a technique question for you. We, coming back around to the Boz Scaggs videos that you sent out, and I texted you this the other day when we talked via text. I said, you're up there with Simon Phillips and Jeff Vaccaro and stuff like that, playing that Boz gig, man. That's. I mean, and now hearing about it, it even makes it more real what you went through after telling the story.
Yeah.
Watching those videos has really appreciated your hand technique, watching kind of the push-pull thing going on. I can tell you've probably studied some Moeller and stuff like that. And we mentioned Garibaldi, just touching the drums. What are some of the exercises that you work on to get that push-pull, to get that nice light touch on the drums, if you will?
Gary Chafee has a book called Patterns, the Pattern series. His book number 4 on technique, I spent a lot of time in. And I got hip to that through Dave Weckl when he was talking about, and this is many years ago, his first instructional video, he talked about finger technique, using the fulcrum. I don't have a stick around me. I got one right here. Hold on.
Is it Gary Chafee Patterns for Improvising? Or technique pattern?
Yeah, it's the patterns. It's the Patterns series, and I think he has 5 books. But number 4 technique. So he talks a lot about.
You can get those on Amazon.
Yes, they're great. So he talks a great deal about the fulcrum. The meat of your index finger, right, and the thumb, and using that to actually hold the stick, and then you engage the fingers. Okay, now. Weckl's thing was just keeping all the fingers engaged, and he has this exercise where you do triplets. You start out doing, you'll do a set of triplets alternating, and then you'll go to 6s, and then you go to 9s, and then you go to 12s, and you go back and forth, and you do those in cycles of 10. So you do alternating. You do 10 exercises of triplets, then you go 10 6s, then you do 10 9s, then you did 10 12s. Okay, so Chafee's thing is he goes above and beyond that. What he breaks down is you not only do those, but you employ your fingers. You work on just, let me put this down. You work on just your index finger and your thumb, and then you engage your middle finger, then you engage your 3rd and 4th finger. You go back and forth, and you utilize these individually. Okay, so you're not only just doing this, right? You're using each individual finger. Now, that it's a great exercise, but I was like, all right, well, scratching my head, when the heck am I ever going to play with my fingers? Okay, what I didn't realize was what that was developing me to have is a real loose grip. And one of the things that young players, and I know I struggled with for years, is anytime I had a complex fill or something that was going to be like a 16th note groove, a 16th note fill, or a 32nd note fill, or whatever around the kit, my first thing was I was going to tense up. Okay. And when I tensed up, I wasn't able to execute it cleanly. I would either, I generally would rush, and I was never able to execute it the way I should have been able to. And that technique there right alone allowed me to have a looser grip and a more cleaner approach to the kit. I didn't have to struggle as much, you know. It's sort of like you go to do something and you hold your breath. Well, that's really not the way we should do it. You know, you have to be able to consistently breathe and allow, you know, the blood flow to get to all our extremities so we don't tense up. So there's so much. I mean, the Chafee pattern series is just incredible to begin with, but I spent a lot of time in that technique book number 4. And that was one of the things I think that allowed me to have that loose ability to play the push and pull. You know, that is very inherent and also works well with the shuffle stuff, especially the up-tempo stuff, especially the up-tempo swing stuff that you see guys like, you know, Will Kennedy just burn, right? You know, just well, if you slow it down, he's just moving his fingers. I mean, he's just moving the stick like this. You know, it's like, dude, you're an alien. Where are you from?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Jeff Hamilton's like that too. You watch Jeff Hamilton, he's and his hand's not even moving. You know,
it's like, okay, I'm gonna go home and I'm burning my stuff.
Yeah, right.
Hey, David, talk to us a little bit about your solo CD, The Shapes, and how did that come about?
Well, I was involved in a band project years ago, and it never came to fruition. We recorded some really great tracks, and I had some tracks that were left over from years and years ago. Actually, even going further back than that, I have a great friend named Shane Terrio. Shane is a guitarist that plays with Hall & Oates, and he's the music director for Daryl's House. He and I.
Cool.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, he played with Boz Scaggs. He also played with the Neville brothers, and he and I met early when I moved to Nashville at like '96 doing sessions, and he put out a solo album in 2000 that he asked me to play on, and then 3 years later, he put out another solo record. That's probably 2002 or something. And he said, you know, it's something you should consider. And, you know, you could have tracks to play along with and sell them at your clinics. And, you know, there's it would definitely be a goal for you to put, it's something to put on your resume and, you know, to have something that showcases something else that I do, right? You know, because I played with all these other artists, but there's a passion and a kind of style that I play that I don't get to play very much. So it was an opportunity to showcase some of that. But it started years ago with him inspiring me. And I started it, I think, in 2002 or 3, and then got sidetracked. And then I went to New Orleans with him, where he lives and he was originally from. And we cut 4 tracks with him, with George Porter Jr. from the Meters, and then David Torkanowski. And we cut 4 of Shane's songs that he had written. And then, so that was maybe 2006 or 7, 8, I don't know. It was a while ago. And then I got sidetracked again, you know, life, playing on tour, just not having the time. If I had the time, I didn't have the money. So after the Boz gig in 2017, I made a commitment. It's like, you know what? I got to finish this. So
Set the goal.
Yeah. So I hired some of the guys that I worked with the Boz band, and we recorded another 4 tracks, and it came out in 2020. Yay. What a great time to promote. You know, yeah. And it was a drag because our plan for 2020, everyone's plans went down the drain, but I had in February, I had about 9 clinics booked between February and the beginning of April. So that's a lot, if doing clinics. And all my companies were really supportive. So my plan in hope for 2020 was to do a bunch of those clinics, universities, music stores, wherever I could promote it, and then do dates with Rick Derringer to supplement everything else. And of course, that didn't happen. Everything.
But your CD is out and it's available.
It is. I sell a lot of them through my website. My website's kind of funky, but direct. I've sold like the majority of what I have sold direct on Facebook. It's available on Amazon. You can download it on iTunes. It's going to be available on other download platforms, but those things are just a really pain in the butt to get going. And unfortunately, I didn't do it to make a bunch of money. It's more of an artistic labor of love. But with the download platforms, you don't really make any money. So if you want to support the cause, reach out to me. If you don't, that's cool too. I just wanted
David to get your copy today.
Yeah. David,
what's the album called again?
It's called Shapes.
Shapes.
Here,
Hey, David, real quick, you said when you and I chatted, you said that you wouldn't mind giving one of those away to one of our viewers. Is that cool? Okay. Yeah. So how about, okay, guys, you got to help me with this. I think, how about, let's see. How about Kelly Ray Tubbs? Kelly just won one of your CDs. How about that?
Yeah.
There you go. Kelly won one of your. There you go. Yeah.
Cool.
Kelly won one of your CDs. So we'll get her to get in touch with you and get you get one of your CDs. That's awesome.
My pleasure.
On the I do have a question for you real quick. Did you want to show your CD? Do you want to hold it up?
Sure.
Yeah, sorry.
Shapes.
Yeah,
there you go.
This the album cover was actually done by my oldest son, who was big into art, and he did this when he was like 12 years old.
Nice.
He's 23 now. He's not much of a practicing artist. He's got a good job at a hospital, but I always really loved the artwork, and music is, different colors and different shapes. So I thought that was actually an appropriate title.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
A question for you, coming back around to the style thing again. You had mentioned shuffles, right?
Oh,
and you've sat in, Piccaro's shoes. So there's a shuffle player. What did you? Okay, I know we talked about the books on your technique, the Gary's books, but what do you do to work on your shuffle technique? What are some of the stuff you did there, especially like the kick drum and stuff, just to get it to land right and feel right? What were some of the things you did there?
Play. Practice and practice. So I would eat up everything that Piccaro did. I would play the 8th note, 16th note patterns. He would play on the hi-hat, the shuffle, the halftime, the two-handed shuffle. I listened to Chris Layton from Stevie Ray Vaughan to learn the blues shuffle. He's got a great instructional DVD out, the different variations. Another guy that totally changed the way I played shuffles was Tommy Brecklin. Tommy Brecklin spent a number of years working with Robin Ford and Roscoe Beck. They had Robin Ford in the Blue Line.
Yep.
Another phenomenal shuffle player. And there's so many different minute variations of what you can do with your ghost notes that impact the groove and how the shuffle feels. There's something like, Chris Layton talks about a rub shuffle or a Texas shuffle, which basically is you're doing 2 strokes on the snare drum along with the ride cymbal, and then you do a rough into the snare drum. That's a rub shuffle. Yeah. And then you have just the straight ahead, Chicago shuffle, 2 hands playing the same thing. Just so many different variations. So I became a student of that and just really wanted to explore all the different possibilities and how those possibilities affected the groove, not only at a slow tempo, but a fast tempo. And then I just sought out other guys that played shuffles well, and just played and practiced them. Shuffles are hard, and it's overlooked a lot. Unfortunately, with country music, man. When I moved to town, I wasn't in love with the genre. I appreciated and respected it, and I moved here in the 90s, in the early 2000s, so it was still really country music. Now its complexity or its complexion has changed rather, and you don't hear a lot of shuffles. You don't hear a lot of train beats. It's really kind of regurgitated 70s rock that's not real good. Not all of it, but it's sort of lost its identity, if you will.
Yeah.
And when I moved to town, I was humbled by guys that could play a good shuffle, just a straight shuffle that didn't have any ghost notes. It just the space would kill me. Eddie Bayers, my gosh. Let me tell you guys, Eddie Bayers has got a pocket the size of a truck.
And David, if you've got an album somebody could go listen to, or a student watching this might want to listen to, is there a reference, like a specific album you would recommend they listen to get more into the shuffles?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you can look up Robin Ford and the Blue Line, there's about 3 or 4 records. Robin Ford has a lot of great records as an artist, but he had a band, I guess a band situation with the aforementioned guys that I spoke about. Tommy Brecklin on Tommy Brecklin on drums and Roscoe Beck on bass.
Robin Ford and the Blue Line.
Yes. So there's about 3 or 4 records there, and then anything by Stevie Ray Vaughan, with Chris Layton. And we're talking like the bluesy two-handed shuffle. There's just a wealth of.
Well, I just asked because sometimes we drop names like Chris Layton, and some of the younger guys don't really associate him with Stevie Ray Vaughan. So sometimes it's good to have an album name to go get,
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's so many different grooves that I could recommend folks to check out, with Jeff Porcaro and the Halftime Shuffle, Carlos Vega and the Halftime Shuffle, Bernard Purdy and the Halftime Shuffle. There's a lot of information, a lot of great playing out there. I know you guys, we're all probably very close to the same age. One of the tragedies with technology and sort of the lack of focus young people have today is, I know I was part of the generation that sat down and listened to a record, and I read the liner notes, and I got familiar with players, and that's not a resource anymore. But it's a very fundamental, important part of your tutelage as a musician, is to know players and identify them and understand why certain players inspire you. I remember seeing Jeff Porcaro's name on a David Gilmour album, and then I saw him on a Boz Scaggs album, and I saw his name on Michael McDonald's record, but he was in the band Toto. So I was like, well, how is this possible? And then I realized, then I was informed, there was a thing called a session guy.
Yeah.
But it's I don't want to say, is it a lost art form? I don't know if it's a lost art form. It's something that I guess young people don't pursue, but it's really important. It's like a responsibility as a player. You got to know players. You got to understand. You got to go back to go forward.
Oh yeah.
Is there anything you think? Is there anything you think we could do as drum teachers to bring that more to the forefront?
I think it's very important that you challenge your students to find out information on players. I've been in clinics where I've asked young drummers, who's your favorite band? And they'll say so-and-so, and Rush, for example, and they know who Neil Peart is. And then I'll say, well, you know who Steve Gadd is? Yeah, of course I've heard Steve Gadd. But then I'll say, do you know who Rick and Jerry Marotta are? Or do you know who Russ Kunkel is? Or do you know who David Garibaldi is? Or, so on and so forth, John Robinson. And they won't have a clue. And it's not that I want to embarrass them, but, I say to them, it's really sort of important to go back or to investigate these players and understand that their work is the foundation of what you're kind of hearing today with the drummers that are taking place above and beyond, all the great drummers. I mean, there's so many, Benny Greb and all the really chop oriented drummers, but there's a lot that stemmed from the drummers that I just mentioned that allow the guys who are playing now to do what they're doing, and it's not a matter of paying homage. It's just it's a matter of knowing the history of your instrument and where things have progressed from, whether you like swing music, Elvin Jones and Philly Joe Jones and Art Blakely and all those great drummers, they inspired Dennis Chambers. They inspired Vinnie Kelly and Dave Weckl. Those guys wouldn't be the players they are that inspire us if we didn't have those guys. So it's sort of important to know where all that came from.
Yeah, I think well taken. I think there's a culture in the drumming community at large these days, more so than there used to be, of learning the next lick, finding the next exercise, developing your chops, getting the next book or watching the next YouTube video and assimilating things like that. And I think maybe listening as an art form, as an educational art form, is just sort of, it's not gone, but it's just not as emphasized. And I think that's part of our responsibility as teachers.
Absolutely. I would love to teach a music appreciation class, not to just drummers, but all musicians, and require them to bring in their favorite record if they have one. If they don't, or their favorite artist, go out and buy one and come back and speak about not only the artist, but everything that took place for that artist to be able to have that piece of art, that piece of music, all that had gone into making a song. It's not just a download. People don't realize all that takes place. It's such an afterthought.
Yeah.
But
not created in a vacuum, right?
It's out there and it dissipates, and there's no having been in the studio and having produced records and artists for independent artists, there's so much that goes into the recording process that I think as a musician you need to be aware of.
Yeah.
It allows you to be a little bit more appreciative that all that takes place and goes into being able to have a final product. I don't even know if it's considered a product, but a final piece of music.
I would even argue that it makes you it just makes you a better player.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely, man.
You have all these touchstones to refer back to. Oh yeah, I remember that feel that Dave Northrup played on that Boz Scaggs record. And then that informs how you're going to approach the next time that something like that comes up.
And they could say, well, I wonder where he heard that. Well, Jeff Beccaro. Where did Jeff Beccaro hear that? Well, he heard it from Jim Gordon and Jim Keltner and Bernard Purdy. And then you investigate those guys. It was one of those things. I remember I don't want to keep over talking, but I remember being infatuated with Stuart Copeland. And I remember there was a limited amount when I was growing up on finding and gathering information, and obviously the drum resources that we had, Modern Drummer and that sort of thing, and going to music stores and talking to established musicians. That was the limit. That's where you gathered your information. But when I was able to further my quest for investigating why Stuart Copeland played how he did, I found out that he grew up in Morocco, and he was sort of dubbed the reggae rock drummer, but it really wasn't reggae at all. It was African rhythms, Afro-Cuban rhythms, more African-based style of playing, because that's where he grew up culturally. So that impacted the way he played a great deal, and I would have never known that had I not been intrigued enough to actually really find out why he played the way he did and where his style was developed.
That's right. I got to see him speak at NAMM, and they asked him how he came up with his unique style, and he said exotic in, exotic out.
Yeah.
And he listened to all kinds of crazy music, just things that we wouldn't think of. He was talking about radio stations he'd pick up from other countries that have cigarette commercial music from the 50s, or what you might hear in a cab in Sri Lanka, and he just absorbs all of that all the time.
Wow.
That was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's just so incredible. It's like, intentional listening, right? He's just really intent on hearing what normal people actually wouldn't pay,
Yeah.
Yeah, that is
and that's how
amazing.
he developed his unique style. Nobody sounds like him, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, Dave, so what are you up to now? What's in store for you?
That's great. That's a great question. I actually have a clinic coming up on the 20th at a music store in Clarksville, Indiana, called the Drummer Superstore. I'm going to be promoting my new CD. That's the first clinic I've done this year.
Yeah.
Also going to be teaching some lessons, and I've been teaching some lessons. After that date in Indiana, I'm going up to Central New York, and I'm going to be doing doing a master class on the powers of three. It's a demonstration and discussion of triplet bass grooves, including shuffles and halftime things. I've done a few of those at several universities around the country, and I've got one of those booked. Actually, I've got two of those booked while I'm up in Central New York, and that's later in the month. And I'm trying to make myself more available for teaching, seeing how I'm around more.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've always struggled with is keeping a regular student base because of my erratic travel. When I would have road gigs, and a lot of times I would not be able to keep a steady schedule, but that of course has changed considerably. So I'm accepting more students on a regular basis and on a not so regular basis. So those are several things that I have going on.
And
Are you doing online lessons?
Online?
I have taught online. I did a bunch of that at the onset of what we went through in 2020, and I had about 2 or 3 ongoing students, and then I got distracted by doing some other things. But it's something that I am able to do, and I enjoy doing. So if there are people that are interested in that, they could reach out to me at davidnorthrup.com or dsnorthrup@aol.com. You can email me, and that's RUP, not like the airplane company. And then social media. I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. So and that's a lot of times where I've had people reach out to me, and I've had several ongoing students that I've taught online.
David, what do you like to do with your spare time when you're not focused on drumming and music?
Spend time with my family. Definitely. I've been blessed to have a great home life and wonderful wife and 2 very, very good kids, thanks to my wife, 2 boys. So spend as much time with them as possible.
That is fantastic. That's great. Well, David, listen, we really thank you for coming on. You're a real, inspiration to drummers all over the place. Not just because of your drumming. Like I think what you said, just being a real person. I think it was said before we went on. You were talking about one of your favorite drummers, that they were just a real person, and being able to just talk to you and get to know you a little bit more and get on here and stuff. It just, thank you so much.
Well,
now, we know you're an Evans guy, right? Well, all 4 of us are Aquarian, though, so we're going to give away an Aquarian drum head right now.
All right.
And we're going to give away a Focus X, and it is going to go to Peter Retzlaff.
Oh, yeah, Peter.
Okay, so Peter, you just won yourself a 14-inch Focus X.
Hey, remember, Peter, there's a caveat. When you get the head, you're supposed to report back to us and tell us what you think about it.
Peter, heavyweight drummer, and teaches at the Collective in New York City.
Awesome.
Right on.
Oh.
He's done a bunch of
Man.
great video presentations with Mike Clark and some other really well-known drummers as well.
Wow, that's so
Congratulations, Peter.
Congratulations. Awesome.
Thank you for being on, David.
Yeah, you know
David,
what? I
what a-
will come
what
back
an
anytime. I could talk to you guys, all afternoon. There's so many things we didn't cover. So,
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about the Oak Ridge Boys. I wanted to know about that. That is so cool, man. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So maybe
We'd love to have you.
we'd love to have you back on again.
we'll
So-
circle back around and look at schedules. I'd love to do it again, man. You guys are, fantastic to chat with, and I'm very appreciative and honored to be along with you all.
Awesome. Well, David Northrup, thank you so much. On behalf of Jeremy, Chip, Rick, and myself, we are Drummers Education Connection. Thank you guys so much for watching and chiming in on Facebook and YouTube. We will see you next week. Jeremy, who's our guest next week?
We're going to
We
have a special show next week with two guests on who are actually good friends of mine too. Kevin Stevens, who teaches at the Musicians Institute down in LA, fantastic drummer, New Orleans player, really deep into that. And Kevin Lyman, I think it's Lyman, Lehman, from Colorado. He's the
my home state, Colorado.
He's the president
Right
of the Colorado Percussive Arts Society chapter there, and is an amazing player and teacher. Really great guy. So both of those guys will be on next week, and we're looking forward to that.
Awesome.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, David. We'll
Thanks,
see you next
David.
time around, buddy.
We
Take it
appreciate
easy.
Come on
Take
back.
care. I will.
Get shapes.